Dr. Kathrada, before we go back to Dr. Samete, you wanted to respond to her earlier comments?
Yes, the first point I want to make is why have I not even received an acknowledgement of receipt of my Section 21? So I sent the two, I didn't even get acknowledged. I can understand all her questions or the points you raised, but at least an acknowledgement to say, I've done my due process, I sent those to Section 21. The second thing is, on the point of dosages, when it comes to the pandemic, like I said, we're dealing with a disease that we know nothing about. So even when it came to steroid treatment, certain doctors started on 20 milligrams a day, then it went 40 milligrams a day. But in discussion, in trying it out with patients, because that's what we do, we train to look at a symptom and we treat accordingly. And when you're working on the ground and you see the patient deteriorating and somebody else says, hey, why don't you try a higher dose of steroid? We try that. So when it comes to the dosages, we know about scabies. Yes, we know about it. We know about what the dosage is, but nobody knows. Yes, the trials are coming out, but unless we get an opportunity to use it on our patients, we can start off at a lower dose and say, it's not really working. We'll go from 6 milligrams to 12 milligrams. Let's try that. But on the point of dosages, really, we need to be working with it to know the dosages. The third point I want to make is, if you look at the Medicines and Related Substances Act, Section 1, subsection 3, it says that if a drug is registered or available, it doesn't say registered and available. It says it doesn't have to be registered. So if the drug is available now, it is the duty of SAHPRA that the drug is being made available. It doesn't have to be registered. If they decide that an available drug can be used, we are supposed to be able to use it. And I'd like to comment on that one. And the other thing is, if you look at Section 2, capital B, they talk about the function of a body like SAHPRA. It includes what their function is and what authority they have. And if you look at their authority, they have the authority to have run the trials already, and we're already a year into it. And right now, what we're saying is it's safe. Give us an opportunity to use it. And like the gentleman before me said, we're not asking it for it to be mandated. We're not asking it for it to be on the protocol. Other countries have it on the protocol. We don't even have it to be used legally. And the thing is, we wanting to be used legally so that we can control the dosages. It's out on the black market, and it's rife on the black market, getting sold for 1,000 rand a tablet, and people are using it at the wrong dosages. So we want control back, and SAHPRA can give us the control back to help save lives.
Dr. Samete, how do you respond to that? Because I would imagine that doctors have an ethical duty to consider ivermectin in the treatment of their patients, considering what we know now about the drug.
No, thank you. And I mean, the doctor is correct, Dr. Naseeb is correct in quoting that section. And that's what Section 21 enables. It enables us to make access for unregistered medicines. And that's why, that instrument is there for that purpose. In terms of your application, I'll definitely follow up with the team. I must apologize for that. You should have received an acknowledgement and some feedback. So I'll make sure that the team reaches out to you today. Regarding clinical trials, we don't conduct clinical trials as a regulator. We review the submissions for clinical trials. So to date, we have not had a single submission for a clinical trial. And that's why in our statement, we said we encourage that these clinical trials are conducted. If you look at the trials that, are currently being run even in other countries that the HALE analysis looks at, the numbers are quite small for us to be able to make a conclusion. And we are of the view that if these are conducted in South Africa, we will be able to review that and advise in terms of the numbers that are required.
On that point, Dr. Samete, just to follow up, for the layperson sitting outside of this, there is process, there are the various acts, there are the laws, but it does seem to be overly bureaucratic at this stage to be responding to a public health crisis, a pandemic, and to Daniel Elof's point, some 12 months into this, when we've known since April last year that other countries were investigating ivermectin for use in the treatment of COVID-19. What has been the delay here?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And as I've said, we don't conduct the clinical trials. It is the research community that conducts these clinical trials. Yes, we're part of global conversations around this product, but all of us have been very clear as regulators. You can look at, the regulators that we align ourselves with, the European Medicines Agency, the FDA. None of them have authorized this drug for the treatment of COVID. If you go onto the FDA website, you'll see a very clear FAQ that indicates some of the risk around it. So there's been conversations around it, but because the studies were not properly designed and powered, we've been saying bring more data, and we continue to say that around this matter.
Daniel, just to come back to you on the impact that this is having on the illicit trade in ivermectin, do you have any data available on that?
Not at the moment. I mean, that's a matter that we are looking into, but we also are aware of, I think, an unintended consequence of this matter. And as I've said, we are looking at mechanisms, and we will be communicating quite soon.
Shabnam, the Sahari movement, as I mentioned earlier, 55,000 strong. What are you planning? What are your next steps, considering what you've just heard from the CEO of SAHPRA?
Well, before I get to that one, Michael, I just want to address a couple of points that a constitutional right to health under Section 27 is being violated. Doctors are seeing up to 60 patients a day. They don't have time to do copious Section 21 applications, as Dr. Katrada has just mentioned, and it's a deliberate obstacle that's been put in the place of these medical practitioners. And of course, there is information to suggest, and that could be wrong, that ethics approval for being addressed. Perhaps Dr. Samete could correct us on that one. And of course, this points to a direct conflict of interest at SAHPRA. Let's address the elephant in the room. SAHPRA's donor base is largely the Gates Foundation, which is heavily invested in vaccines only. And so therefore, any alternative treatment means that the vaccine agenda cannot pursue. Of course, if vaccines are safe, effective, and long-lasting, we support that. But so too is ivermectin. I want to come to the supply issue before I talk about the protest that we're calling for. Dr. Andrew Hill specifically said that we need to get supplies now, get ready now. South Africa does not want to be at the back of the queue on ivermectin like we are on vaccines, because then we would have failed and betrayed this nation. As for what we're calling for a poster protest specifically amongst healthcare workers who are overburdened with a lack of beds, lack of medicine, lack of proper PPE, and themselves losing loved ones to this particular pandemic. So we're calling for a protest, a virtual protest of posters across the nation, and we're very certain that they're going to heed the call until ivermectin is approved and urgently rolled out on a free basis to our masses.
Dr. Samete, we've got a minute to go. Just in conclusion, what do you make of what you've heard on the panel today, and particularly that assertion that SAHPRA is largely donor funded, and there are these hints or at least suspicions that crass commercial considerations might be an obstacle or hindering progress here?
Yeah, that is very far from the truth. As SAHPRA, if you look at our annual report with our financial statements, you will definitely see the quantum of the grant funding that we require, and it's minuscule to what we receive. And again, this funding that we received was to clear a very specific project, being the backlog clearance project, that we've been very transparent about as an organization. So we have a mechanism of transparency. Please go and have a look at our annual report with all this detail. But I'm also hearing, and this I've heard very clearly, is that doctors are asking for access. Doctors are asking that they will take the responsibility of ensuring that the patients, are administered with the correct doses, there's monitoring, etc. And that, for me, is a very clear message, and which is a very different message maybe to other conversations where we cannot just make this freely available because it is an unregistered drug. So it needs to be made, if it is available, it needs to be made under very controlled mechanism. And that's very clear for me from Dr. Nassab, who's spoken just now. Yeah.
Right. Obviously, where there is conformed and confirmed consent and informed consent, I should say, between a doctor and a patient, that is a quite different conversation to say, make it freely available to anyone and everyone. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today, and I believe you do have to get off to a meeting. Thank you very much, Dr. Boitumelo Samete Makokotlela, CEO of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAHPRA, and thank you too to our other panelists, Dr. Nasiba Katrada, General Practitioner, Daniel Eloff, Attorney at Hurter Spes, and Shabnam Mohammed.